My name is Musa, and I should have listened to my grandfather's warnings about the shadows that follow when the earth bleeds. It started 3 weeks ago, the day they came with their papers and bulldozers. I was leading my cattle to the watering hole near the baobab tree where my father had brought his herd and his father before him. The morning mist still clung to the grassland like the breath of sleeping spirits when I heard the engines. Government men in pressed uniforms stood beside machines that looked like metal beasts. They spoke in English and broken Hausa, waving documents that meant nothing to me. The words I understood were enough: development project, relocation, progress. But all I saw was the end of everything I knew. "You have 2 weeks," the man with the shiny badge said, not looking me in the eye. "Fair compensation will be provided." Fair compensation. As if money could replace the graves of my ancestors, the paths worn smooth by countless hooves. That night, I found Halima dead. She was my best cow, the mother of half my herd. I found her at dawn, lying in the grass 50 meters from where I'd left her grazing. At first, I thought she'd simply died of old age or sickness, but when I knelt beside her, my blood turned cold. Her throat had been torn out. Not cut, not bitten by any wild animal I knew. It's like massive claws had ripped through hide and flesh and bone. But here's what made my hands shake as I examined her. There were no tracks around the body. Nothing. The grass wasn't even disturbed except where she'd fallen. I called my cousin Ibrahim, who knew about these things. He came with his motorcycle, took one look at Halima, and stepped back like he'd seen a ghost. "What could do this?" I asked him. He shook his head slowly. "Nothing I know, brother. Nothing natural. We buried her that morning. As we covered the grave with stones, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The shadow cast by the baobab tree seemed darker than usual, and it stretched toward us even though the sun was directly overhead. Ibrahim noticed it too. "Musa," he whispered, "we should go." The second attack came 5 days later. This time it was Yusuf, my prize bull, strong as 3 men, with horns like spears and a temper to match. I found him the same way, throat torn out, no tracks, no disturbance in the earth around him. But this time I was ready. I'd been sleeping in the field with my cattle, my grandfather's old rifle beside me. I'd heard nothing during the night. No growling, no struggle, no sound at all. It was as if death had simply reached down from the sky and touched Yusuf's throat. The government men came again that day. 1 week left, the man with the badge said. He looked tired now, like this job was wearing on him. "The construction crews need to start clearing the land. My cattle are being killed," I told him. "Something is hunting them." He glanced at Ibrahim, who'd come to help me bury Yusuf. "Wild dogs, probably. Another reason to relocate to the designated area. You'll be safer there." Safer. In their concrete buildings and fenced compounds. Far from the grass and water and wind that had sustained my people for centuries. That night, I sat by my fire and tried to think. 2 cattle died in less than a week. If this continued, I'd have nothing left. My herd was my life, my family's future, everything my father had built and his father before him. I must have dozed off around midnight, because I woke to the sound of my cattle stirring restlessly. They were bunched together in a tight group, heads up, eyes wide with fear. The air felt wrong, like the moment before lightning strikes. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving across the grass. Not the shadow of any animal or person I'd ever seen. It flowed like water, but it was darker than the darkness around it, if that makes sense. It had no fixed shape, but I got the impression of something massive, bigger than a cow, bigger than any creature that should exist. I grabbed my rifle and stood up. "Hey," I shouted. "Get away from my herd." The shadow stopped. For a moment, I felt like it was looking at me, though I couldn't see any eyes. Then it began to grow. Not moving closer, actually growing larger, spreading across the ground like spilled oil. My cattle began to panic, lowing and pushing against each other. I raised the rifle, but what was I supposed to aim at? How do you shoot a shadow? Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. Just gone. The cattle slowly calmed down, but they stayed bunched together until dawn. I didn't sleep again that night. I couldn't stop thinking about how the shadow had grown when I challenged it. Like it was feeding on my fear, getting stronger from my anger and helplessness. The third kill happened 2 days later, but this time I was ready with more than just a rifle. My grandfather had been a medicine man before the missionaries came. He'd taught me things the modern world didn't believe in. how to read the signs in smoke and wind, how to speak to the spirits that lived in the old places, how to protect what was sacred. I spent the morning gathering what I needed: leaves from the baobab tree, soil from my grandfather's grave, water from the spring that had never run dry. That evening, I scattered a ring of blessed soil around my herd and spoke the words my grandfather had taught me. "Spirits of this place," I whispered, "show me what hunts in the darkness. Show me the truth." Then I waited. The shadow came just after midnight, bigger than before. It circled my herd like a predator testing a fence, but it couldn't cross the line of blessed earth. I watched it grow frustrated, saw it pulse and writhe like a living thing. And then I heard something that made my blood freeze. My grandfather's voice, speaking from the shadow. "Musa," it said, though the voice was wrong, like words spoken through water. "Why do you fight what cannot be stopped? Why do you resist what must be?" "You're not my grandfather," I said, though my voice shook. The shadow laughed, and the sound was like wind through a graveyard. "I am every ancestor whose bones have been disturbed, every spirit whose sacred place has been destroyed. I am the anger of the earth itself, grown strong on the blood of what has been lost." That's when I understood. This thing, this shadow, it wasn't just killing my cattle. It was feeding on the destruction of my people's way of life. Every bulldozer that tore up sacred ground, every grave that was relocated, every ancient tree that was cut down, made it stronger. "The more you resist," the shadow continued, "the more I grow. The more your people suffer, the more powerful I become. Soon I will have enough strength to do more than kill cattle. Soon I will feast on those who would steal the land itself." I thought of the government men with their papers and promises. I thought of the construction crews who would come to build their roads and buildings on the bones of my ancestors. "What do you want?" I asked. "Give me what I need," the shadow said. "Stop fighting the relocation. Let your people scatter to the winds. Let the old ways die quietly, and I will have power enough to reach beyond these grasslands, to touch those who deserve to feel fear." I stared at the writhing darkness, understanding finally flooding through me like cold water. The shadow wasn't trying to save our land. It was using our pain to make itself strong enough for revenge. It wanted us to give up, to let despair feed it until it could hunt bigger prey. "No," I said. The shadow swelled, growing until it towered over me like a wave of darkness. "Then watch your herd die, one by one, until you have nothing left." But I was already moving, breaking the circle of blessed earth with my own hands. The shadow rushed forward, expecting an easy kill, but instead it found me standing over my cattle with my arms spread wide. "If you want them," I said, "you'll have to go through me first." The shadow hit me like a cold wind that cut straight to my soul. For a moment, I was nowhere and everywhere at once. I saw the grassland as it had been 100 years ago, when my great-grandfather first brought his herd here. I saw the baobab tree as a sapling, the spring as it bubbled up from deep earth, the paths worn by countless cattle over countless seasons. Then I saw the bulldozers again, the concrete and steel rising from sacred ground, the graves scattered like broken teeth. I felt every loss, every violation, every small death that had fed the shadow's hunger. "You see now," the shadow whispered inside my head. "You feel what I feel, the rage, the helplessness, the need for justice." And I did feel it. The anger burned in my chest like I swallowed fire. Part of me wanted to let it consume me, to become another voice in the shadow's chorus of fury. But then I heard something else, my cattle lowing softly in the darkness, trusting me to protect them. My cousin Ibrahim called my name from somewhere far away. The memory of my father's voice, teaching me that a herder's first duty is always to his herd. "You're right," I told the shadow. "I do feel angry, but my anger belongs to me, not to you." I opened my eyes, when had I closed them, and saw the shadow recoiling from me like smoke from a flame. My cattle stood calmly around me, no longer afraid. "You cannot touch what I choose to protect," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You can only take what is given freely, born from despair and surrender." But I will not surrender. The shadow writhed and hissed. "Your cattle will die. Your people will be scattered. Your land will be destroyed." "Maybe," I said, "but that's not your choice to make. And it's not your pain to carry." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handful of soil. Not the blessed earth from the ritual, but plain dirt from the spot where my father had taught me to tend cattle. I threw it at the shadow. You might think dirt would pass right through something made of darkness, but this dirt was different. This dirt remembered. As it hit the shadow, I saw sparks of light, brief flashes of every moment of joy this land had witnessed. Children laughing, cattle giving birth, rain falling on drought-cracked earth, families gathering under the baobab tree. The shadow screamed, not with my grandfather's voice, but with a sound like tearing metal. It began to shrink, pulling in on itself like a dying fire. "This is not over," it hissed as it faded. "As long as the pain continues, as long as your people suffer, I will return stronger than before. Then I'd better make sure my people don't suffer," I said. But the shadow was already gone, leaving only the sound of wind through grass and the gentle breathing of my herd. I found the third dead cow at sunrise. Aisha, one of my youngest heifers, lay in the grass with her throat torn out just like the others. But this time was different. This time, there were tracks. Human footprints, leading away from the body toward the road where the government vehicles had been parked. I followed them, my rifle in my hands and my heart hammering in my chest. The tracks led to a cluster of bushes near the main path, where I found something that made my blood run cold. A man in a government uniform, unconscious in the dirt. It was the man with the shiny badge, the one who'd been handling our relocation. His clothes were torn, his face was pale as milk, and his eyes were wide open but seeing nothing. When I shook him, he began to babble in English and broken Hausa. "The shadow," he whispered. "It came for me. Said I had to choose. Let your people stay, or watch my family die the way your cattle died." I stared at him, pieces falling together in my mind like stones finding their places in a wall. The shadow hadn't been trying to protect our land at all. It had been playing both sides, feeding on our despair while using our pain to terrorize those who threatened us. "What did you choose?" I asked. He looked up at me with haunted eyes. "I chose my family," he said. "I always choose my family. But it killed your cow anyway. Said it needed to keep feeding, to stay strong enough to reach the city where my children live." That's when I understood the shadow's real plan. It wasn't content to feed on the pain of displaced herders. It wanted to grow strong enough to spread beyond the grasslands, to carry its hunger into the cities and towns where the powerful lived. It was using us as a stepping stone to greater prey. "The construction," I said. "When does it start?" "Tomorrow," he whispered. "The crews are already on their way." I tried to delay them, but he shuddered. It made me choose again. Your land or my daughter's life. I helped him to his feet, my mind racing. The shadow was playing a game I was only beginning to understand, turning victim against victim while growing stronger on everyone's fear. But maybe that was its weakness too. "Listen to me," I said. "Gather your crews. Bring them here tomorrow as planned." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You want me to destroy your land?" "No," I said. "I want you to help me destroy the shadow." By sunset the next day, more people had gathered at the baobab tree than I had seen in years. There were the government men with their machines, looking nervous and confused. There were my fellow herders from the surrounding area, men I'd grown up with who'd brought their own cattle and their own stories of strange deaths in the night. There was Ibrahim with his motorcycle and his knowledge of old ways. There was even Father Michael from the mission, clutching his Bible and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I'd spent the day explaining what I'd learned, what I'd seen, what I believed the shadow really was. Some listened with open minds. Others thought I'd been driven mad by loss and stress. But they all came, because they all had something to lose. The shadow feeds on fear and despair. I told them as the sun touched the horizon. It grows stronger when we turn against each other, when we give up hope, when we let pain consume us. But it has a weakness. The man with the badge, I'd learned his name was Mr. Adamu, stepped forward. What weakness? It can only take what we give it freely. Our anger, our despair, our surrender. But if we choose differently, I gestured to the crowd around us. Look what we have here. Government men and herders, Christians and Muslims, old ways and new ways. Everything the shadow wants us to believe can't coexist. Father Michael cleared his throat. "What exactly are you asking us to do, Musa?" I pointed to the bulldozers parked at the edge of the gathering. "I'm asking you to start your construction. Right here, right now." The government men looked at each other in confusion. At night? Without proper preparation? That's not safe. "It's not meant to be safe," I said. "It's meant to be a choice. We can tear this land apart in fear and anger, feeding the shadow until it's strong enough to devour us all. Or we can build something together, something that honors both the old ways and the new. I'd spent years watching my world disappear, feeling helpless as everything I knew was swept away by forces beyond my control. But now I saw a different path forward. What if the development doesn't have to destroy everything? I asked. What if we can build schools that teach both English and our native language? Roads that connect our grazing lands instead of cutting through them? Buildings that honor the ancestors instead of burying them? Mr. Adamu shook his head. The plans have already been approved. We can't just change everything because... Because what? I interrupted. Because people like me don't get a voice in what happens to our land? Because progress means erasing the past instead of building on it. A murmur went through the crowd. Some of the herders were nodding. Some of the government men were looking uncomfortable. The shadow is counting on us to hate each other, I continued, to see only the destruction and loss. But what if we refuse to feed it that hatred? What if we choose to build something better instead? That's when the shadow came. It rose from the earth like black smoke, bigger than I'd ever seen it. The size of a house now, maybe larger, fed by weeks of pain and conflict and growing desperation. The cattle scattered in panic, the people stepped back in terror, and the shadow laughed with a sound like breaking glass. Too late. It hissed, speaking with the voices of everyone who'd ever felt helpless in the face of change. Too late to choose anything but fear. It reached for the nearest person, one of the younger herders, barely more than a boy. I saw its tendrils of darkness wrap around him, saw his eyes go wide with terror. "No," I shouted, stepping forward. "You want to feed? Feed on me." The shadow turned toward me, and I felt its hunger like a physical weight. "Musa the herder," it said mockingly. "Musa the fool. You think your little speech about cooperation will save you? You think holding hands and singing songs will stop what's already begun? Maybe not," I said. "But this might." I pulled out my phone. Yes, even herders have phones now, and held it up so everyone could see the screen. On it was a video I'd recorded that morning, showing the baobab tree, the spring, and the graves of my ancestors. "This is my land," I said to the camera, and to the crowd, and to the shadow that writhed before me. "My family has lived here for generations. Tomorrow, it might be gone forever, but that's not what matters." I turned the camera toward the crowd. "What matters is what we build next. Together." The shadow recoiled like I'd hit it with fire. "What are you doing?" "I'm choosing hope over fear," I said. "I'm choosing to trust that people can be better than their worst impulses. I'm choosing to believe that my children can inherit a world where the old ways and the new ways don't have to be enemies." I looked directly at Mr. Adamu. "I'm asking you to work with us. Not just relocating us or compensating us, but actually partnering with us. Use our knowledge of the land. Let our children help design the schools they'll attend. Build roads that serve herders as well as city dwellers." Mr. Adamu looked around at the faces watching him, government officials, herders, children, elders, all waiting to see what he would choose. "The plans." He began, then stopped. "The plans can be changed. If there's genuine collaboration, if everyone's willing to compromise." The shadow let out a shriek of rage. I could see it becoming less solid, less real, as the fear and despair it fed on began to transform into something else. "This is what you're afraid of, isn't it?" I asked. "Not the bulldozers, or the development, or the change. You're afraid of us choosing to work together instead of tearing each other apart." The shadow made one last desperate lunge toward me, but its tendrils passed through my body like cold mist. Without our freely given fear to sustain it, it was becoming nothing more than a bad dream. "I will return," it whispered as it faded. "As long as there is injustice, as long as the powerful prey on the weak, I will always return." "Maybe," I said, "but when you do, you'll find us ready. Together." It's been 6 months since that night, and the shadow hasn't returned. That doesn't mean everything is perfect. The development project is moving forward, but slowly. Some of the herders are learning new skills to work in construction and maintenance. Some of the government officials are learning about sustainable land use and traditional ecological knowledge. My herd is smaller than it was. I lost 3 cattle to the shadow, and change always comes with costs. But the remaining cattle are healthy and strong, grazing on land that's still ours, even if it's shared now with schools and roads and buildings that weren't there before. I've become something of a spokesperson for what people are calling collaborative development. I travel to conferences in the city, speaking to men in suits about the importance of including local voices in land use decisions. It's strange work for a herder, but it pays well enough to support my family and my herd. And at night, when I'm back home under the baobab tree, I sometimes see other shadows moving in the grass. Smaller ones, quieter ones. The shadows of ordinary fears and everyday struggles. Will there be enough rain this year? Will my children find good jobs? Will I have enough money for my daughter's school fees? These shadows don't frighten me the way the Great Shadow did. They're part of life, reminders that we live in an uncertain world where loss and change are inevitable. The difference is that now I know we have choices in how we face that uncertainty. We can feed our fears until they become monsters, or we can starve them by choosing hope, cooperation, and the hard work of building something better together. The shadow was right about one thing. As long as there's injustice and conflict in the world, something like it will always exist, waiting to feed on our despair and division. But it was wrong about something more important. It's not inevitable. We don't have to give it what it hunts. We can choose a different way forward, one careful step at a time, together. My name is Musa, and I am still a herder. But now I tend more than cattle. I tend to hope itself, making sure it has what it needs to grow strong in the darkness. And so far, it has been enough. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more stories like this.